Hello, everybody. February the 6th, 2026, coming to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Wonderful Tulsa. Guess what? I had to pre-record this because as you're watching this, and I know it's the same crew that's in here every week, from Bonnie, Steph, Phyllis, my cousin Darren, etc. There's a lot of people that are going to be in here watching and so forth. So go ahead and still comment back and forth. I will check it out when I get back home from the event because I hit the stage at 6 p.m. and you're checking this out at 7 p.m. Central. So I'm in the middle of my presentation and as you're watching this, and I didn't want you to go without a show. So I went ahead and decided that we were going to do a pre-record with Pat Harker, Lieutenant Pat Harker from the Tulsa Police Department. He's kind of a big homie to me. He's like my sensei. And I've known this guy for most of my career. I've known him from the academy days when he was basically teaching me defensive tactics, which is not necessarily one of my strong suits or fun things to do, but it's one of those necessary evils. And he's kind of like a karate guru. So he's probably some sort of a black belt of some type. And, but anyway, he's decided to come on. And the reason why I really wanted to talk to him, number one, not only is he a very, very interesting person, but he is somebody that is kind of one of the big part of the board of the Tulsa Police Department Museum. And I thought, well, heck, if we're going to be on stage and we're going to be doing a benefit for him, what better person to bring on than a guy that can talk about it and really kind of, you know, share some information in reference to the museum. And who knows who's watching out there. Somebody may have some additional ideas for them, and they're very receptive right now as to different ideas, etc. Boy, that's something about that lady out there in the Tucson area that's daughter is on the Today Show. My gosh, I'm really kind of interested to see. Hopefully that whole thing is going to turn out positive. I'm really worried about that. But man, somebody breaking into this lady's home and demanding a ransom, that's really some scary stuff. And so hopefully there'll be some really positive news coming out on that. I'm hoping. I have no doubt that the police department there is doing everything that they can to try to find her. And I really, my prayers are really for that family because that's just really some scary, scary stuff. Next week we're gonna have Officer Nick Hall with Palm Bay Police Department out of Florida. And this guy's got one heck of a story. And I'm also going to remind everybody that's tuning in tonight, because it seems like when I look at the statistics, it seems like we drop off some. So there's about 80% of the people, and I have a motherload of people that watch these, by the way. You know, Brian, the fingerprint guru. I mean, we've had a ton of people checking that out. What an epic episode that was. Every episode from the last 3 weeks have been just rock solid. All of them have been. They're all rock solid. I don't put fillers on. But my point is, subscribe. Like and subscribe, please. Leave a comment. You know what? I actually respond to those comments, and it means a lot to me, and I enjoy this, and I'm very, very blessed to be here, and I try to tell you that every week. But without you, this is not a show. So I definitely appreciate everybody being here, etc. Now, Lieutenant Pat Harker, I'll tell you a little bit about him. Lieutenant Pat Harker is a 30-year veteran of the Tulsa Police Department and has served many roles throughout his career. Lieutenant Harker has worked in uniformed patrol as an officer and as a patrol supervisor as a corporal, sergeant, and lieutenant. He has served as a field training officer and as a supervisor trainer. He served on the department's training cadre as a defensive tactics instructor for over 18 years. He served over 16 years on the special operations team, which is our SWAT team. And I worked with him directly there as not only a scout and team leader. And those are both positions. Let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, to become a scout, you have got to, it's not easy to get there. And not to mention to become a team leader. You are amongst greatness already. So you have to know your stuff, as well as a less lethal and tactical training officer. He has worked as a plainclothes officer, who was an undercover plainclothes person, and so was I. And we will talk a little bit about that because that's some good stuff. In the street crimes unit for our Uniform Division Southwest Division, And he also has served on task force that dealt with narcotics, violent crime. I know that we did one in reference to a robbery where we were looking for a murder suspect, and as an investigator and investigations supervisor. He has authored numerous narcotics as well as high-risk search warrants. He is currently an administrative lieutenant in the Special Operations Division. He is a founding member of the Tulsa Police Department Museum or their board. He's a member of that. And that's a big deal. And he's done a lot. He's also a grad from OSU with a journalism background. And he told me today he actually did some television stuff for ESPN. And this guy was actually he's an announcer, or he's been an announcer at like boxing events and stuff. So welcome, Pat Harker, my friend, big homie, and really sensei over the years. This guy, he's a good dude, and I appreciate you being here, Pat.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason. I appreciate being here with you.
Now, I've known you, and I have to make mention of his brother Tony, who passed away a couple of years ago. And Tony was my right-hand man at my house when I had issues, and he's dearly missed. And so every time I see Pat, I can't help to. By the way, my wife says hello to you, and I want you to tell your wife thank you for letting us borrow you tonight.
I will let Paula know. Tell Tina hello for me. I
will. So Pat, tell everybody kind of what interested you and how did you end up getting. You had a significant journalism and you were kind of heading down a different path, and tell us about kind of your life before policing, and then what interested you in becoming a police officer.
Well, a few things. I grew up down the street from an officer or two, so I always had a good respect for them, a real good respect for law enforcement as a whole. I think it started in elementary school. I was one of the school, kids that got to help the other kids cross the street. So AAA did a program back then where we helped, basically a school crossing guard, but we were all, the older kids for the younger ones. And then from there, just grew up in town, grew up playing sports. I was a soccer fiend, turned down a scholarship to play soccer at Ottawa University in Ottawa, Kansas, and much to the chagrin of my father. But man, I loved the game. I thought maybe I'd go play pro, but it just didn't work out for me. So I had to do something else. Went to Oklahoma State, graduate degree in journalism, and then married the love of my life, Paula. We've been together, married 37 plus years, have two sons. But Paula had already graduated when I was finally getting out of college. And of course, my first job offer was for, I think, $1,000 working as a TV reporter in Ardmore, Oklahoma, to which my lovely wife, who's an accountant, said, yeah, we're not doing that. So I looked locally here. I got to work for an NBC affiliate here, starting off as a part-time camera operator. And then they had heard my voice and then said, hey, we need you to do commercials. I was like, well, sure. And I worked there for a few years and worked up, was a studio engineer for sound and stuff for the newscast, the 5, 6, and 10 o'clock, and continued to do voice work for them. And then I got hired away by Winter Communications. I worked on 3 different shows for ESPN, Chris Lincoln and the group there. We did a show called America's Horse about quarter horses, racing across America and Thoroughbred Digest. So a lot of good experience, got to travel all over the U.S. and Canada, and then came back home when I was starting to have a family. It was just hard to be on the road like that. Worked for KBZ radio here in town, selling time, still continue to do commercial voice work. But to stay in my media realm, our fraternity hosted a boxing event. How I got started in announcing obviously came in handy, but I was working for a gentleman. We did a charitable event. We did a fight night for our charity. And I guess the announcer that they had was just not real good. So I told the guy, basically bluffed him and said, oh, I can do that. So I got to work with the Stillwater Boxing community, and the guy that was the head of that, and Ralph Friend was his name. He's since passed, but what a great guy to give him my start. And then when I came to Tulsa, I started back into martial arts because I'd been doing that since I was about 11 years old. And I worked for a gentleman named Dale Apollo Cook, a five-time world champion kickboxer, was into mixed martial arts and different things. And he had his ring announcer at the last minute, like on a Wednesday, back out on him because he had to move the transient nature of media types, radio, TV, etc. A guy got hired into Dallas, and I was one of his students there, and I said, well, I can do it. I've got a tux. So I started for him, and that carried on. I did that for, 25 plus years. And I had the luxury of getting to do ring announcing all over Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Texas. I actually, for 4 years, I would travel out to Las Vegas and ring announce fights out there with the Nevada State Athletic Commission, working for Dale for kickboxing and mixed martial arts. This is about a little before the UFC started. So, and then I got to do, the more I did it, I got to work on Tommy Morrison's crew. A guy named Tony Holden hired me to do events for him. So I got to be on ESPN2 and Showtime, and it was a heck of a good time. It was nothing better than get paid to do something you love, watch a sport you love, and sit ringside. So Tommy Morrison, Rocky V. He's from Rocky V, right? And he got arrested here in Tulsa. God rest his soul. Yeah, he passed several years ago, but he got arrested for some award or something. It was something silly, but I don't remember. But he was a pretty good guy, wasn't he? He wasn't a bad guy. Yeah, I liked his trainers, and his manager was phenomenal. Tony Holden, his wife Tina. They're the ones that hired me to ring announce for them. And I just had a good career, and then I stepped into judging fights and doing that. And then obviously, I think how I got interested back into being a police officer was I was working at the NBC affiliate here, and a young lady was going to our police academy. And I went, that sounds fun. And being a highly paid media type that I was, insert joke here because they're not highly paid. I know you've talked to Nat Cash before about that. So I applied. It took several years to get on, but when I finally did, I was still able to do all the ring announcing and the commercial voice work. So it's kind of how it morphed into becoming a police officer. Yeah. And I will say this, I didn't even know probably 20% of what you just said. I mean, he's very modest, because I would have been telling everybody, hey, yeah, I did this and I did that. Not him. I mean, I had no idea you were that involved in all of that stuff. Not to put you on the spot, but if you were to announce me for this show, give me a little demo. Ladies and gentlemen, Detective Jason White of the First 48 and True Crime Stories Into the Fire, weighing in at, well, I'll leave that alone. So, yeah. Okay. Nice. I like it. So I'm sure there's a lot more, you gotta be perfect. I mean, they don't want you flubbing it. So, or you won't be sticking around long. You're right. Yeah, no, you had to be on. And I had the luxury. I got to work for Dale for 25 plus years, and I got to work for the Holdens. And I got to ring announce some big names. Alan Green, he was a Tulsa fighter, a super middleweight, great guy. And then Iran Barkley, I think, was one of the biggest guys. And my biggest deal, I got to help do the pre-fight stuff for a show on, I got to do Friday night fights on ESPN, but I got to work with Jimmy Lennon Jr., who is a famous announcer, especially for boxing out in California and stuff. So I've met Michael Buffer, but Jimmy Lennon Jr. and his dad, who was Jimmy Lennon Sr., was a famous Madison Square Garden announcer. That was the pinnacle for me of meeting them. So it was cool. It was a cool, fun part-time job. I think you got a picture of Jimmy Lennon in there, Amanda. He's the one I just sent them to your Facebook, but he's the guy. Yep, that's it. That's Jimmy Lennon right there. He's a big name. I mean, he's a big time name in reference to that world. So, man, that's really cool. What an opportunity. So you get on the police department finally, and did you have a kind of any? So this wasn't something you dreamt. I mean, other than, you're a kid, you thought about it, but
but this was kind of a career change for you, really.
Well, it was, I got to do some cool things before I got on the police department. I didn't get on until I was in my early 30s. So I did a lot of training. You mentioned earlier, I've been in martial arts. I've got my 3rd degree black belt. I've studied Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Aikido, Muay Thai. I mean, anything that you can do with your hands, feet, elbows, legs. I just always gravitated towards that. Of course, when I was younger, David Carradine and Kung Fu was a big thing. And of course, Bruce Lee and some other mentors out there. But so, yeah, I just was really interested. And I trained a bunch of police officers when I was working, at the karate school and teaching there. And then, ring announcing fights, I got to meet some of the big UFC guys before they were UFC guys. Maury Smith, phenomenal fighter, some other ones along the way. So I kind of had that interest. And I was like, I wonder what it'd take. And then one of my good friends had gotten on the police reserve. And I thought, well, that'd be fun. And I was in between jobs and looking for more of a career. So I thought, police work, I'll do that. So,
yeah. So when I first got through the police academy, Pat Harker was in uniform, and I went to that squad. So I can remember vividly Pat, after I'd been out on the streets for a very short time, Pat coming in going, "That's enough. You follow me. You're not stopping another car." And he took me up. Works. He goes, "That's it, man. We've had it. We've had it with you. Just you're working too hard. Stop it."
Oh yeah. And well, you were a young Jedi, so yeah, I had to pull you back and rein you in a little bit, but because we're working the graveyard shift, and at a certain point you just kind of go, okay, I'm tired, working from 11 at night till 7 in the morning, and it was like, okay, rookie, you're done. Quit stopping.
But what was cool though is if you ever went on a call with him, you could actually almost say anything you want because you're not going to be the one that's going to have to be fighting. Be like, yeah. But anyway, so nevertheless, so you started out in patrol like everybody does. Everybody starts on patrol, and then I know that you went off to street crime. Was that your first spot, street crimes? Because that's where we met again.
Street Crime South, working for Chuck Jordan and Bruce Burton, who are just some of the top law enforcement officers the Tulsa Police Department's ever had. So it was
Chuck Jordan was our chief. Yeah, he was our chief.
Yeah, later on he was our chief. So yes,
and an episode on this show. So he's been on here before.
He was phenomenal at catching bad guys. And Bruce Burton, the corporal, that guy could mine the computer systems and find anything, and it was just great. They taught us how to be really good cops, and you got to be a cop's cop. So yeah.
Bruce Burton was probably one of the best cops I've ever been around. And I didn't have the option. I didn't have the luxury of working with Chuck Jordan, but Bruce Burton was, I've never seen anybody with the memory of bad guys. And if somebody was out doing something, he was like, yeah, that's probably this guy. Let's check and see what he's been up to. And sure enough, he'd be right 95% of the times, So that was really cool.
He and Tom Ford was another great corporal that taught us all about pursuits and cars and stuff. And then Bruce, I had some great mentors coming up myself. And that's, when you came to the squad, I thought, okay, I'll take this young guy under my wing and help him out. So,
yeah, he did. As a matter of fact, he took me so much under his wing that we wrote 94 search warrants that year. And when I say actually I wrote 78 of the 94. And I really was getting sick of it. But Pat was like, listen, I'm trying to teach you. And he taught me how to do undercover. And if somebody needed to go get a massage, it was like, get ready, young Jedi, because you're going to do it. And there was we need to go buy drugs. Jason, you're going to do it. And really in retrospect, I look back on that, and he really kind of laid down the foundation for me that has paid real dividends for me throughout my career. And as a matter of fact, I think I remember you telling me one time, if it hadn't been for you knowing me working the streets, I don't know that I would have ever even made it to street crimes. It's just one of those things that's hard to get to certain places like that unless you know people and they see your work ethic. And so that was some good times back then, no doubt. And back then it was a lot different. Back then we actually were buying drugs, and we were doing things like that were extremely dangerous if you think back on it.
Mhm.
But what was cool about our unit, just kind of tell the audience what made our street crimes unit unique, because we were unique compared to the other ones.
We were different because we didn't just focus on narcotics and drugs and street level stuff. We actually, because of Chuck Jordan and Bruce Burton, we followed bad guys. We found bad guys, auto thieves, serial robbers, serial burglars. I mean, we had more fun chasing after people. But yeah, I mean, well, and like I told you when we were first interviewing folks, I was like, okay, you can ask about the narcotics and stuff, but man, push more. Ask for, hey, do you know where a stolen car is? Do you know of somebody that, knows where a body is or who killed somebody? And you've just taken that, and I'm going to tip my hat to you, young Jedi. You have surpassed the sensei, because your interviewing skills, I love watching the first 48 and seeing you, because you have taken that to a whole nother level. And like we talked earlier when we were having lunch, the job is more than just chasing bad guys, putting them in jail. It's communicating, it's talking with people, it's getting to know them and figuring out what makes them tick.
Yeah, that's right.
We were a different unit because we didn't just do the standard go buy drugs, write a search warrant, kick a door in, arrest bad guy, rinse and repeat. We got to do other things. In fact, the other squads, homicide would come to us and go, hey, we need you to find this guy. The different robbery squads were like, hey, you need to go find, so we had, supervisors who empowered us enough to just let us go and, reined us in when they needed to, but they let us really flourish and learn by making mistakes, and it made us better officers.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's what was cool about that unit too, is we weren't restricted by the boundaries of the city. We would go wherever the crime took us. And we went everywhere. It didn't matter, man. We found ourselves in Drumright, Oklahoma, which is not close. And we would go wherever we needed to go.
Yes. And we got to work with some federal agencies, but we were like, it was just fun, working with the FBI, the Secret Service, some of the others along the way. It was good times.
So you decided to promote. That you decided, and just that was a decision, I'm sure, for your future. It's a whole different area of policing, really, in a sense. You got to go back to the streets, and you were kind of on a path of working in specialty units, and now you're exchanging all that to get promoted. What was that like for you when you became a supervisor? Did you ever have any regrets from that, or has it just been kind of an interesting transition for you and you've enjoyed that?
An interesting transition. Well, I started teaching at the academy, doing defensive tactics and teaching guys how to stay alive and fight for their life, etc. Use force, all the things, handcuffing, baton, OC spray, all the things that, keep us alive. But I mean, having all that training background and knowledge, I wanted to share that. And my goal, I kind of had 5 year goals coming on. I'm one of those weird folks that does that, And, I wanted to work in a specialty unit within 5 years. And then I wanted to become a field training officer because I wanted to share what had been shared with me. So I thought that was a next step. I didn't promote until I had 11 years old. I wanted to be, there was a saying years ago, back when you and I were coming up, you wanted to be you wanted to be known as a cop's cop. And you didn't want to just, first chance you get, take a promotion test and move on. I wanted to do some things. I wanted to work as a training officer. I got to do that. I wanted to work, individually, one-on-one training officers, got to do that. And I thought, well, here's another opportunity, promote and do that. And, when I first promoted a corporal, I stayed a corporal for 8 years because I wanted to get good experience and knowledge and basically train up my replacement. I did the same in defensive tactics. I'd see kids that come through the academy that had a knack for teaching and a love for it, and would bring them in when the opportunity arose. So, and that was a natural progression for me to move up and do that, and continue to do that as a sergeant. I worked in the field. I got to work in investigations in 2 different spots. I got to work in street crimes in 2 different spots, be supervisors of that. It was just, you're teaching the next the next class of guys to take over for you.
Mm-hmm. And you're just over 30 years. I'm sure that you're planning on sticking around probably to 35, ish.
Well, when I came on the police department, my goal was to make it to sergeant and then do 30 years and see how it goes. And I've done that, but I've been very fortunate in my career. I've been able to move up, and with our departments, it's, you get to do a lot of things. I see why guys stay what we call a slick sleeve. They stay an officer for years because you can move in and out of assignments, I've worked all three sides of town that are 3 divisions. I've worked, it's fun. It's not a 9 to 5 stuck in an office. Of course I am now, but it was a good time. So now I help, acquire equipment and stuff that guys need to keep themselves safe. So,
yeah.
But that was
what is your
for promoting.
What is your advice to young officers of today? I know the whole world, well, me and you both, neither one of us have been out on the streets for a long time, but do you have any advice to the young cops or things that you're seeing that you wish that you could just kind of, do this?
The biggest thing I would say to folks is be patient. Take your time. I mean, there's times where I'd rather not have the bars or collar brass or anything. And I see why some of my best friends from the academy stayed officers, because they, commanded where they could go. But be patient, learn, practice. There was a famous, cartoon show on Saturday mornings with the Magic School Bus with Miss Frizzle. And I loved her comment, go out there, get messy, make mistakes, and learn from it. And that's the biggest thing I see is guys they're chasing that next promotion. They're chasing that next promotion. I was like, no. I got into an argument with one guy at a sergeant promotion who'd just been an officer and immediately was able to promote to sergeant. I was like, you haven't done anything. Be patient, learn to be a good officer, a cop's cop, and then, move up. I stayed in rank. I didn't make sergeant until I had 19 years on. And then, of course, now I've been a lieutenant now for probably almost, so about every 10 years. So anyway.
Any aspirations to try to become a captain?
Oh, absolutely not. No, at this level, I can kind of, I'm still in control of where I get to go because, unfortunately, sometimes things get political, and at the captain level, they can move you wherever they want. There's a good thing about seniority. Nobody wants to, go back to you go to the bottom rung. I wish it was tied to years of service, but that's a whole nother thing. But there's a reason you need to get experience at each level, and you don't need to jump ranks either. To me, first you need to be, if you can't, supervise one person as an FTO, then you certainly shouldn't be supervising a whole squad. I've had, super young squads, a mix of squad, as a supervisor in a squad, you wanted your, I'll just say it. You wanted your report takers, your ticket writers, your guys that would go after the hot calls, your ass kickers, and then your folks that are the touchy-feely community service folks. And I've done that too as well. You need to be well-rounded. You need to learn. So be patient, take your time, try and, I tell a lot of guys, I wish our department would make you work all 3 sides of town, because there are almost three different police departments. So
yeah, I agree with that. I've never worked out east. Other than field training. And
I kind of chuckle because did a big hardened cop just quote Magic School Bus? Yes, I did, because it's a great tagline. So
yeah. I'll tell you what, Pat said it earlier. He said that probably one of the biggest tools that we've got in our toolbox, and that's our ability to communicate with people. And if you, as a police officer, and that's kind of one of the things that I think that, it's the stupid phone that people are born with in their hands now. And they just kind of, when Pat and I were kids, I mean, you talked on the phone for 3 hours a night and had a phone cord that was 150 feet long, and that's just the way it was. And I think that we've kind of lost that a little bit. And the ability, and not only have we lost it as a police force, the citizens that we deal with have lost it too. And so we need to really work towards that. That's the number one thing that really, it's more important than anything else that we deal with, because it can prevent you from having to get into really bad situations. So
Yeah,
my
not-
advice, yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Not to
my
get off-
advice,
Yeah,
no, go ahead, Pat. No, go ahead.
Be my guest. I'm your guest. You go ahead.
Well, I'll just say this. The best advice that I ever got was that my dad had told me years and years ago, is that just to make sure your badge is not 5 sizes too big, that it's the same size it was the day they issued it to you. And really, it doesn't say anywhere in the rule book that you can't be nice to people and so forth. You be as nice as people will allow you to be.
Well,
And
dealing
treat
with
people right.
dealing with informants and stuff, if we treated people like absolute garbage, even bad guys, if you treated them like absolute garbage, guess what? Your information shriveled up and you had nothing to go on.
Yeah.
I think the best advice I had was Sergeant Jim Clark, because I'd worked in Jim Squad years ago. And he told me when I promoted, he told me congratulations, but he goes, just because you're putting stripes on your sleeve doesn't mean you're the smartest person sitting at that table. And I've listened to that and I went, you're right. I don't have to be the best, but I have to get the best people around me. And, a rising tide lifts all boats. Just saying.
I like that. I hadn't heard that. That's good. All right. So really, I want to get into this next section, and I want to talk, well, what for the future of your career. I mean, are you if something comes up, I mean, I'm sure that you may change. Is there anything that you haven't done that you just really want to do in your job on the police department?
I can't think of anything. I was talking, I was never, to me, homicide wasn't sexy. It was like, I know you love it because you've been a student of that since you were a kid. I always wanted to chase live people. I thought robbery would have been fun. Narcotics was fun for a while, but then you get tired of, your phone going off at all hours of the night and going, hey, can you come in and buy this? Or, hey, can you do it? And I hated that, my wife is a saint. I mean, Paula, I think finally at the end of our street crimes era that you and I were in, she finally said, hey, dude, you're done. So 4 years of street crimes as an officer, she was like, okay, you need to do something else. And fortunately for me, there was a downturn. I forget what the deal was, but we went back to the field. I would have no problems going back and, going back to the field now because, when your day ends, it ends, or as you guys used to say in homicide, when their day ends, our day begins. So it could be, you could be on a bender for 16, 17 hours. So no, there's not really anything I haven't done. I don't think I've been blessed in my law enforcement career. It's still a great career. You can still do good in it. And I think getting the right people involved help. I know I was going to make a comment when we were talking about, we were talking earlier, I chuckled. I've never had a body worn camera on me, but I would have no problem having that. I know they're with all the ICE situation going on, and not to get off on a tangent, but they're enforcing federal law. Okay, put body cams on. Okay, well, when body cams first came out, look what happened. The public found out that, hey, we're recording you and you can't lie about what's happening. To me, I don't know why our politicians aren't wearing body cams. They open their mouth, they say something. Look how media is, it's become a 24/7 media thing from the get-go. So, put cameras on everybody. The truth will get out there. So anyway, sorry.
Yeah, that's true. And as a SWAT team member, I just want to make mention of this too. Just curious, I'd made a mention of this. I was a negotiator on the SWAT team, but it's nothing as a scout. To become a scout, that's coveted. I mean, that's probably even more coveted than I would think than maybe even the team leader. Is it not?
You're the first guy in the door. There were several times I got to do that. Throw a flashbang in and go in, and you're the first one in. And so, handling a mirror and you're just with a pistol and you've got somebody over the top of your head with a rifle. I mean, I got to be behind some good scouts. I learned from some good ones there. Demetrius Thompson was a great one. Troy DeWitt's probably still one of my favorite scouts. Learned a lot backing him up. And then, if he was out of town or I had to take over, I could help out for him. I got moved from one team that I was on that we were real, we had a good core group. I got asked to move to another team and run that. And to me, it's back to my training stuff. I wanted to be able to become, the best that I could. And then I wanted to share that with others, being a tactical training officer and teaching up. Like I said, we're all not going to be here forever. You've got to train up your replacement. And I had the luxury of getting to teach basic SWAT schools, advanced SWAT schools. And every time I did it, I learned more, about movement and this and, how to teach it. So,
yeah. Our SWAT team is one of the best in the country. I would easily say that it's in the top 10, at least. Easy.
Yeah. We had a great reputation. I saw, having been able to, be a host for the NTOA conference, the National Tactical Officers Association. I went to several classes and courses over the year. Went to LA one time, went to Albuquerque. I could see our lineage for the Tulsa Police Department was basically LA County, who is a phenomenal SWAT team. LAPD had a good SWAT team. Pima County, there were some other good ones around. Ohio's got some good teams. New York, obviously, the guys going up in the tenements and the apartments with the shields. That was phenomenal to learn shield work. I mean, we have a good reputation. We did good work, but I could see where our experience and knowledge came from. You got to give credit to the folks that, plowed that path before we got there. And I just wanted to help the young kids behind me become the next good, officers that the best they could be.
Yeah, I can definitely tell you this, that Pat really does care, and he wants the people that he's training to know what's up and to do the best that they can. So I do appreciate that from you for sure. So let's talk a little bit about this Tulsa Police Museum effort, Pat. Where did this start up? And I love it, by the way. I think that we've got a rich history here, man, and I think that it's great. And so kind of tell people about what this effort is and so forth.
Well, I got to give some good credit to Ron Treckle. Years ago, he wrote a book, it's about the Tulsa police history. And like I've told people when we've done some media stuff and endorsed it, I was like, the Tulsa Police Department is Tulsa's history. I mean, because we grew up good, bad, or indifferent. We learned and moved on from there. But Ron Treckle, a retired corporal, Treacle, sorry, I probably mispronouncing it, so my bad. But wrote a book about the beginning of the police department up to about 1990, I think. I came on in 95, so a few years after that. But he had the history of the different police departments, the buildings. He did a talk with us explaining a lot of the race riot stuff. Tulsa had a legal hanging back in the early 1900s, and we still have an item from that where the rope that was used, some family member had kept it all these years. All the different badges we've had all the years, all the different chiefs, etc. So about 2024, early on, one of our officers, he's now a sergeant now, Tom LeBlanc, got with me and a couple others and said, hey, how about, he was collecting badges, patches, etc., like a lot of us do. Challenge coin. I'm a challenge coin guy, but a lot of us were collecting stuff. But Ron had been collecting stuff his entire career, and he's probably collected stuff for 60 plus years. And so there's uniforms, there's police call boxes, which I remember carrying a bag phone in my first police car. This is from a few years ago. But he had that, and he'd kept a great running total of things that went on and things. Tulsa's known. I know you've got a yield sign that was developed by Clinton Riggs on the Tulsa Police Department that hangs in the Smithsonian. He developed it here. But there's some other neat things that we've done in the Tulsa area. And then, so a lot of us were sitting around talking. It's like, hey, have you ever thought about, putting together a museum? And since our department's about to move to a large new public safety center, we talked about, possibly having some museum space out there. And so to display some of these items like I said, the Tulsa Police Department's history is Tulsa's history. And so we were wanting to put up some uniforms and some of the different badges we've had and some of the spectacular cases we've had. I know you're the first in our series to speak for the event, to raise money but in 2024, we founded the Tulsa Police Museum, and we've just been working from there to collect items to document all of it. In fact, our executive director, Jenny Lindsay, her husband unfortunately passed away during COVID and was a line of duty death. She's our executive director. She actually worked at the Gilcrease Museum, which is a giant Western heritage museum here in Oklahoma, in the Tulsa area, that's known for its Russells and all the different stuff. And I think the University of Tulsa has taken over that as well. But so we have the people in place, retired officers, current officers, reserve officers, different folks within the community that have joined in and helped out. And we're trying to get to where we can have a space. We actually got to go see you speak at the U.S. Marshals Museum. And boy, if you haven't been to Fort Smith to see that, folks, you're missing out, because it is a phenomenal interactive museum. I would love to have something like that here, but we're not near that. That's their national museum. So we're just going to be, I don't want to say we're just going to be a city museum, but it'll be cool to see it when we do. Oh, there you go.
Come here real quick. You were asking me about my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
There she is, Pat, 20 years old.
I remember when you were like this.
He's saying he remembers when you were just a little tiny.
Oh, yeah,
for sure. So this is the yield sign that Pat speaks of. This is one of the original ones. And these are super rare.
And our patches of the police department were modeled after that.
That's right.
The early ones.
That's right. That's right. They were actually arguably the ugliest police patch in police patch history until I heard the history. Then I was like, okay, they're kind of cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. But so this was actually invented by a Tulsa police officer. And so the very first yield sign was located in Tulsa ever. And so is there any chance that one of those the original yield signs, because this isn't the original, but is there any chance that one of the original ones that was one of the first signs could,
I don't know if the Riggs family still has one. I know that there's one hanging in the Smithsonian, and then you've got one, which I'm completely jealous of. But yeah, it was developed by I want to say it was Captain Clinton Riggs who developed that. As a you have a stop sign, they have a yield sign, kind of what you'd use in like a neighborhood, as opposed to just a four-way stop sign. So
yeah, Amanda, go ahead. We do. Amanda, throw that video up real quick.
Together an effort to have a museum. First, we're going to be online, and then hopefully we'll have our own brick and mortar at some point.
What's the vision of it, and why did you guys feel a need to create a museum?
Well, the Tulsa police history is Tulsa's history, good, bad, or indifferent, but there's lots of neat stories along the way. That's why we decided to have a speaker series, and I couldn't think of anybody better to start us off than with this character sitting next to me. Yeah,
speaking of that, Jason, you're speaking Friday night for this event. Already sold out yesterday, so that's awesome right there. Sold 200 tickets to this event. What can people expect Friday night, and why did you want to be a part of this effort?
Well, they had seen me speak at the U.S. Marshal Museum. This is a rare event. I don't generally speak to the public. It's not that I don't enjoy it. It's just that primarily I teach throughout the country at law enforcement conferences and such. And they saw me speak. They had approached me and asked me if I would be willing to do it. And of course, I jumped at the opportunity simply because, number one, it's a great cause. And there is a tremendous amount of history that is associated with the Tulsa Police Department that I think that people should have an opportunity to see. And so what I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk a little bit about me, of course, and then we're going to segue from there, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the innovations in the world of forensics that I think is just an exciting time right now for law enforcement, especially with the science that intersects with law enforcement. It's pretty exciting, and it's really easy to talk about because it's just so interesting. And then from there, we're going to talk about a lot more. From there, we'll talk a little bit about some actual cases. So therefore, this event is actually kind of restricted to people that are over 18 just due to the content. Yeah. But it's going to be an exciting evening. I'm really looking forward to it.
I've heard you speak, and I can confirm it's very, very good. Well, Pat, back to you for a second. You guys are collecting memorabilia. How can people help out with that?
Well, we've asked people, if they have a family member or a friend that was either involved in our police department or a reserve officer, we're happy to take items from them that we'll be happy to take out on loan. So we definitely want to get back to people that want to keep that in their family. But we're also looking for items that we can display. We've been talked to our chief, and he's told us that we could have space in the new public safety center. And then one of these days, hopefully, we could have our own building.
And you guys are fundraising to buy display cases and things like that to help preserve this history. But you do have more speaking events in the future, correct?
We do. We kick the series off with Jason starting off, and I talked with retired Detective Mike Huff this morning, and he's told us that he would be happy to be in for April. So that's our next event. And then I talked to Sean Larkin, Sticks, and hopefully he'll be the next up after that, and we'll take it from there. We got some great speakers.
Yeah. Amanda, show that patch that I just sent you to your, that's the, that was modeled after the Yale sign. But, like I said, once I heard the history behind it, I thought that was kind of cool. And so that Pat and I both started in the green uniforms, and we wore that patch, and we're very proud of it because those uniforms are really cool. So what, kind of just some of the cool items that you guys have collected thus far. What's some of the more unusual ones that are just really priceless heirlooms to our police department?
Well, I mentioned the rope that was used in the legal hanging.
Yeah,
it's like where the family kept a hold of that for 40, 50 years, and then have donated it to the museum. I was like, well, that's an interesting item. But there's an interesting story about it. I know Tulsa had a hanging tree that the Indians used for, cattle thieves and rustlers and stuff like that. So it's interesting. And then, we've had some big cases. Mike Huff, the Roger Wheeler case, the president of Telex that owned World Highline, Florida, and involved with Whitey Bulger and the Winter Hill gang. I'm looking forward to Mike speaking about that as well. And then, shoot, I'm not going to give anything away, but your no body case, where you got to, that's phenomenal work. So, there's some other cool stuff. Looking at all the badges, looking at all, it was a different time in history. I remember, when I was growing up here in town, Tulsa Police were just, it's almost like if you knew anybody that grew up around Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania State Police were just known for being just complete tough SOBs. And, I remember guys in Tulsa, I didn't want to run my mouth to a Tulsa police officer because, that's back when street justice was able to happen. So, I was like, don't run your mouth to that officer. It's
yeah.
Yeah.
And remember, there were still some of those old school guys here when we got here.
Oh yeah. It was street correction at its best. I think even the bad guys knew if they were like, okay, well, I'll take my kicking because I deserved it. So yeah.
Actually, funny story, kind of a cool story, and you probably know it better than I do. But I've heard this story of the prison riot in McAllister.
Yes, Ron talked about that a little bit. We're doing a bunch of videotaping stuff with some of the major players in the Tulsa area that were officers, and then I know that I want to say that happened in the 70s, where McAllister is not close to Tulsa. It's further down in southeast Oklahoma, but they called our guys because they knew, when the couple got killed out in Bristow, I was early on in my SWAT career, and we got called out to Bristow to help look for the gentleman that ended up, he was hiding in a church's pantry and eating there. And I'm sure laughing at all of us watching television while we were traipsing through the woods. But, we got called to assist we've assisted in tornadoes and different other events. So, but the McAllister riots were a big deal. And there's some good old pictures and news stories about, I remember seeing it was hot as blazes. I can't remember when it occurred, but I know it was summer because you had the officers sitting in the shade of trees, pouring water over themselves, dealing with, I can't remember how many were killed, but it was interesting to see some of the things.
And as the story goes, from what I've heard, basically when the inmates found out that the green shirts were heading that way, they said, "We're done."
Yeah.
No, we're not interested in that. And so it was because that's what I've heard. I've heard that story that was the case. And it's kind of been confirmed by an old prison warden that I've had on this show too. He said, yeah, there's some truth to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And
But,
there's some other cool pictures and stuff. I mean, I still love the one about the lady that was serving her husband's coffee. That was a phenomenal case that's sitting in the hallway there on the way to your office.
Yeah,
So.
I can't remember the name on that picture, but it's something widow, and she was killing a lot of the husbands or something like that along those lines. But there is a incredible history here. In any leads on any cars or anything like that you guys have plans to maybe, or is there any way to find any of those old cars that were from back in the day, paddy wagons or whatever?
There are a few guys that have redone some cars. I know a couple of our board members. I know Tom LeBlanc and Brian Bryden found an old Kawasaki 1000 motorcycle that the motorcycle unit used back in the 80s, and that's on display at Rick Phillips' shop there at Oklahoma Police Supply, and that's helping to raise funds for the museum as well. So we're wanting to get that reconditioned and fixed up kind of in the way it was back then. So, and there's other calls for things. I know there's different uniforms. Tulsa, in the early years of Tulsa, you had your traffic squad, and then you also had your officer squad. So they were kind of separated. Traffic guys just worked, collisions, wrecks, wrote tickets, and then there was also the other officers that were following up on crimes. Look how much has changed over the years in our time, my 30 years and your 27, 28 plus that around. I mean, look at all the specialty units that have developed. Years ago, Tulsa didn't have a gang problem, but we had a gang problem, and our gang units that's morphed into the crime gun unit and solves a bunch of cases and take weapons off the street. I mean, it certainly helps you in homicide and the robbery guys as well. And then some of the different, you got to work in Vice. We got to work in Vice before it was Vice in street crimes. We covered a lot of different crimes, but then I remember you got to go out to the Special Investigations Division and work in actual Vice, and there's some stories there, I'm sure. So
it was the first Vice unit ever.
Yes, that we had here in Tulsa. I remember there used to be an organized crime squad, because I remember Corporal Bob Shockey, one of my mentors, that just a phenomenal man, worked in that unit, and seeing pictures of Bob with long hair. And unfortunately, God rest his soul, he's passed, but he had some great stories from back in those days. He used to, it was phenomenal, some of the things they did.
Yeah, I remember him telling me one time, hey, go up to that area of what was it? It was like 600 South Peoria where we ran like search warrants all the time. He went off 11th Street, and he's like, hey, I want you to go up there and make a real impact. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? That place has been it was rough for decades.
Well, it's like North Main Street in Tulsa. 638 North Main was notorious for prostitution and drugs and crack. And I remember, before I got on the police department, I worked for a furniture company, and we delivered office supplies and stuff. And I remember I was riding with an officer up to just past that. There was a Quick Trip there. And I remember he was like, yeah, you need to stay in the car, young blood. I'm going to go inside and get a coffee. And I mean, he walked out, and on one side of the Quick Trip, there's prostitutes and whores and stuff. On the other side, there's the junkies. And you're just like, of course, a kid like me that grew up on the south side of Tulsa that was mostly affluent. Of course, I was one of the poor kids that drove my 63 Volkswagen, and these kids are getting Camaros, on a Friday night, and then they wreck it on the weekend, and mom and dad are bringing them another one on Monday at school. And you're just like, so it was interesting. It was a culture shock for me because, I'd never been that far into North Tulsa, but, having worked all three sides of town, there's pockets of bad guys everywhere. It's not just limited, North Tulsa's bad. No, East Tulsa's bad, South Tulsa, around Fairmont and that area, 61st and Peoria. When you and I were running in street crimes, and even out west, it comes in handy, as a Spanish speaker. People look at me and they go, oh, we'd go out east and, work a lot of the Hispanic crime. So it's
Yeah.
just, it's, you know, there's good and bad in all cities. All major cities have problems, not just one area of town. So it was a great eye opener for this young Irish Catholic kid growing up. So I
Yeah.
come from a big family. I was like, there's no way I can ever work undercover. And of course, the first week I'm working undercover, I get to run my first ram on a search warrant and go running in down a hallway. And I remember I'm screaming at some guy to quit moving, and he's crawling over to a closet to try and get to a gun to, you know, keep us from getting him arrested. And I remember we're screaming bloody murder at this guy, not to get off on a story. And I remember Jordan coming down the hallway going, "Hey, Pat, what do you got?" And I'm sitting there with a gun pointed at this guy, me and Gina Hogan. The kid looks up at me and he goes, "Hey, Pat." And I was like, "Hey, Eddie, you were a year behind me in junior high. Oh my God." You know, and I was like,
Yeah.
there's, you know, and I told Chuck, I was like, I can't work undercover on this side of town. Too many people know me. And then, you know, the same week running into a good friend's little brother that got drunk, and, you know, he
Yeah.
fought with one of our officers and getting there. And, you know, I knocked the ball cap off his head. He looks up and he goes, "Hey, Pat." And about this time, you know, Jordan's walking up again. He goes, "Who do you not know in this?" I was like,
Yeah.
"I'm telling you, I know a lot of people." And then working a prostitution sting. And, you know, when I worked in radio at KBZ, one of my coworkers, who will remain nameless, was walking up and talking to our undercover prostitute and going, "Hey, have you ever thought about taking pictures?" And, you know, this is back in the days when I could listen in on my scanner to her microphone and listen to it. I was like, I remember I was back behind Bama Pie over on 11th Street and listening to this guy. And I remember I said to Jordan, I was like, "Hey, Chuck, did that guy just pull up in a gray Mazda RX-7? And Jordan's going, "Pat, if you can see his car, you're way too close. You need to move your marked car out of here." And I was like, no, I'm behind a building over here. I was like, "Hey, is he about this height and wearing a white shirt and a tie that's kind of loose?" He goes, "Got brown hair?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "You're too close." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And of course, you know, I knew the undercover officer that was talking to him. And then he said something. I was like, "Hey," and I was like, "Hey, Chuck, can you?" So I remember I called Chuck on my bag phone. This is how long ago it was that we plugged into the cigarette lighter. I remember calling Chuck and going, "Hey, that's a good friend of mine. Can you tell me?" So Chuck rolls up in his unmarked car, hops out, pulls his badge out, and he calls him by name and says, "Hey, Pat said you need to get out of here." So he left. And of course, he didn't have my bag phone number. So he calls my house and calls my wife. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I need to talk to Pat." And she goes, "He's working." And she goes, "Oh." And I remember all of a sudden, you know, I get home and all of a sudden there may or may not have been a case of beer sitting on my front porch for saving him from being arrested for, you know, soliciting prostitution.
Yeah.
There's some other good stories along the way, but that's
There's a lot of good stories for sure. Yeah. So
nameless.
yeah. I'll tell you what. Is there any plans with respect to this museum effort? Because I know that you're going to be able to start filling a location with stuff to at least get stuff on display to start out.
Yes, we are.
Then your hope is to have a separate building.
Yes,
and that's going to cost a lot of money. But in part, all these speakers are going to help on that. But then from there, is there going to be any? Because I get asked this question a lot, and that is there any plans to start? We used to have a store that people could buy shot glasses and just, I mean, a ton of cool stuff. Is there any plans to start that back up again? Because I get asked all the time by people, "Hey, do you guys ever sell any Tulsa Police stuff?" And I think we got a kind of an iconic logo anyway. It's already ready made. It's a great logo, you know.
We do. It'll be a museum logo. Now, of course, we can't sell the copyrighted stuff for the police department because that, you know, that would look bad. And but yes, I know we've got some merch that we'll have at your event. Some hats. I know a challenge coin is in the way because I'm a challenge coin guy. They've got some T-shirts and hats and some other stuff to help us, you know, continue to raise funds for this museum, because museums are wildly expensive. And the biggest thing is the storage, because you have to be so cautious with uniforms and some of the old, I know we have some stuff, the paperwork and stuff that's just neat to see. that we've kept all these years in a climate controlled environment. It's super expensive to keep that stuff. And of course you want to rotate your displays in and out, but our plan is to start, an online electronic, to kind of show some of the things we have. And then I'd love it. It's educational. So I'd love to see, scout groups and, church groups and student schools come and see some of the rich history that's about Tulsa.
Yeah, I think that's great. As a matter of fact, I'll highly recommend that maybe you guys take a look. There's an interactive museum up in Calgary, Canada. That's the best. It's the best in North America. And it's an interactive police museum. And I'm just telling you this. I should have told you this before, but it just popped into my brain. And they've got a lot of really cool exhibits there that are, it's amazing. But
I've been to Calgary. It's cool. I got to go up there with the ESPN crew. We were covering a junior world show at a place called Spruce Meadows. And I remember the week before, the Queen of England had been there to watch the jumping. So it was neat. I think we got to go to the Stampede for a rodeo one time too, because we started doing some rodeo stuff after the other shows. But it's just, man, Canada is absolutely beautiful. So
it's gorgeous.
Yeah,
I actually went
to look that up. So
I went to the Calgary Flame game, and it was a overtime with a shootout, and the Calgary Flame won. So if you don't think that roof didn't blow off that place, they take hockey to a whole nother level, buddy. But anyway, so is there anything that you're kind of on the dream list of things that you're looking for this museum? Is there anything that you're kind of what would be something that you're really, really wanting that you're kind of surprised that maybe hasn't showed up yet? And by the way, I think he mentioned it, that if you had some incredible item that, and you didn't want to just give it to the museum, you can leave it on loan, kind of a deal.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned.
Well, we wanted to make sure, there's some items, that I have that I want to leave to my sons that I figure they'll want to have. We had a real cool commemorative badge years ago that I, had some extras made. But yeah, there's been a few folks over the years that, have collected stuff and I don't just want you don't just have to give it to the museum. You can loan it to us and, we'll keep it, and get it back to the family, because it's like the artwork all over. They share artwork amongst the museums and stuff too. And I would love to see that. I can't really think of anything that we haven't. Some of the old badges and the patches from early days. We've got there's a picture of one of our officers. This is way before it was Tulsa Police. It was amalgam between the sheriffs and the Tulsa Police. And I think the only reason one gentleman worked on the night shift is because he had a flashlight that he'd ordered, at Montgomery Ward or something. This was like early 1900s. So some of that stuff, I'm sure there's families have stuff from their family member or aunt, uncle, cousin that was on our department that we'd love to show off, because I remember, hearing the stories about the slappers that they used back in the day. Do you remember that? I remember guys.
Are you talking like a slapjack kind of deal?
A slapjack, yeah.
Yeah, I have one of those. Yeah.
Yeah, that they were given, that they would use on a bad guy to get a confession, or as opposed to using an old phone book and just beating the tar and feathers off him until he gives you the information, because we're a kindler, gentler police department now. You just can't, and that never worked for us ever getting information on other crimes that you and I were trying to get out of people. So, but there's some other interesting stuff out there. The motorcycle was a big deal. The guys went down and used their own money and bought that. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And then we've had some other folks reach out to us going, hey, I'm working on a car from, I'm sure nobody wants one of the old Tauruses like you probably had when you came on. The old crap.
Thank God I didn't have that car. That car was like terrible.
With the spotlight on it that you'd use on a car stop. And when you open the door, the spotlight would turn and face away from, so yeah.
No, I didn't have one of those, thank God. But I think it would be really cool if we could find maybe an old paddy wagon from the 20s you know, because
Yes, a prisoner transport vehicle, as a matter of fact. Because
that's right. That's right. And so, you know, hopefully there's maybe somewhere, there's probably, you know, tell you the truth, Pat, there's probably some warehouse somewhere that something like that's been sitting in forever. And people just were like, oh yeah, that thing's been sitting there for 40 years. I was wondering what to do with that. I hope so. And if you're one of those people and you happen to hear about this, or you know a friend that has something like that or some really cool thing, believe me, some of those badges from the past, I almost kind of want, you know, out of all those badges, I almost kind of wish that we would kind of just revert back to one of those really old ones to kind of just pay homage to the old, to the history.
We did years ago. You remember your Major Julie Harris developed a commemorative badge, because, you know, I've always wondered why Tulsa's had a, you know, a seventh. I was like, okay, what? Usually most departments, I mean, this badge is usually for like a county sheriff. Most of our, we had like an LAPD shield, and she did a commemorative with an oil derrick in it and stuff. I'd like to go back to something like that, because I thought that was phenomenal looking, because usually, you knew municipal law enforcement was a shield and the county guys would wear the badge, but somewhere in it, we reversed that. I don't know what happened there, but I mean, I'm proud to wear both of them. So, but yeah, some of the, I would love to see one of the old, you know, they had an airplane years ago, way before, you know, rotary with the helicopters. You know, it would be neat to see that. Some of the old motorcycles, I'd love to see it, like the motorcycle we have is about an 80s Kawasaki, but I'd love to see, you know, an old, you know, shovel head or a pan head from way back in the 40s or 50s. I think that'd be cool, because one of our young motorcycle officers who has a very prominent mustache said, man, I'd love to wear one of the old uniforms, you know, the baggy pants with the boots that were all shined up. And, you know, of course, the hats all looked like they were bus driver hats from the 40s and 50s. So there's some cool things out there, I'm sure. But like I said, we'd love for you to donate it to the museum. If you'd like to keep it in your family, we'll do a loan agreement with you so we can get it back to you, because that's only fair. It's not our stuff. We want to share that, you know, and educate the next generation. So.
Yeah, that's right. As a matter of fact, when I was in field training, there was a police officer. He looked like a house. I mean, this guy was huge. Alan Cubbage is who it is. The guy was huge. And I don't mean huge in a fat way. This guy was just a big dude. I mean, he was one of those guys that could say anything on a call and nobody ever questioned him. All right. And I saw him one night, and I was training in that squad. This guy'd been on forever. I think he still works code enforcement, if I'm not mistaken. And I said, hey, that's really cool. He was wearing one of those old leather jackets.
Yes.
And so when you watch The Outsiders, the movie The Outsiders, from the you know, it's got everybody in it, man. It's an all-star cast from Tom Cruise, etc. C. Thomas Howell. But those cops that are in that movie were actually real Tulsa police officers, and they're wearing those leather jackets. And he was like, yeah, I'm wearing. I said, are you allowed to wear that? And he's like, no, but I wear it anyway.
Yeah.
and he got away with it.
The guys in the 60s were given those, and they were known for, you know, just they were badasses back then. But well, you know, we've got there was lots of good folks in that movie. I had some of the guys that I went to high school with that played Socs in the movie years ago, and I had a good friend that was one of the greasers, Todd Gatewood. He was one of the greasers in it, and he was in Rumblefish and some of the techs. So he got to play in that. He was a year ahead of me in school. But, you know, we've got the Outsiders Museum. Danny Boy O'Connor, you know, developed one of the houses over there in Crutchfield Park, you know, it's still there, and they've got all the pictures. I know all the, you know, S.E. Hinton was a girl that grew up in Tulsa that wrote the book, and then the movie, you know, by Francis Ford Coppola, and then we had all those stars. It was a cool deal. So
she wrote the book when she was in high school, actually at Rogers High School, which still exists. And by the way, that school used to be at one time. Yeah, my wife's yelling in the background that she graduated from there, and she did. And basically that at one time was the largest high school in the United States. Believe it or not.
Wow.
I did not know that. So, and it's still there, and it's very historic, and it's cool. Pat, man, I tell you what, I thoroughly have enjoyed having you on here tonight. If people, and she's yelling to tell you hi, he's saying hi.
Hi, Tina.
He says hello. So if people wanted to, let's just say that people were like, hey, listen, could I donate? I mean, they may not be able to get here to see us speak. And I've gotten a lot of that. There is an option that they can donate, right? How do they do that?
There is. We've got a Facebook page which has a QR code in there if you want to donate there. Look forward to our next series of speakers because I plan on bringing in some other folks and having them. Obviously, I'm going to have you again because we sold these tickets out fast, and we had a few folks because we had that snowpocalypse or snowmageddon or whatever it was. This weekend, of course, we're going to have 70-degree weather, which will be nice. But I had a lot of people reach out to me going, man, I can't come. What am I going to do? And I was like, well, this will not be the only chance. I will, beg, borrow, and steal Jason to have him come speak again, because like I said, I've been to your speech and what you talk about. And of course, all the things, the technological advances just in our own society growing up, but seeing how that's come to police work and how you explain it and discuss it. But back to the old saying, I mean, it's all about communicating and communication with people. We've got a Tulsa Police Museum Facebook page. We'll have our website up soon. That's in the process of being made. Then we'll have more of a social media presence. But we plan to have a great thing with this, and I plan to do our speaker series as long as I can get guys to get up there on a stage and talk. I mean, Sean Sticks Larkin, I mean, look how he's taken off and written a book. And then I know Mike Huff and David Wheeler wrote the book Killing My Father about Whitey Bulger and the whole Roger Wheeler thing. I remember in high school at Southern Hills, because I didn't get out of high school till right after it happened, but you used to be able to drive into the Southern Hills parking lot, and then there was a back road to get in there. And we're having read some of the book, there's I see places and times, and you go, oh wow, that was so cool, because I know where that happened, when it happened, etc. It was a big deal, and we've had some other stories like that within Tulsa. So.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love it, and I'm honored to be the inaugural speaker, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And man, I'm just honored to be a part of it. So it's going to be a great time. For those that got tickets, congratulations. We hope to blow you away, and hopefully it's going to be an epic evening. And thanks a lot, Pat. I appreciate you being here. It's been awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, I'm everywhere. I'm on almost everywhere. Social media. You can go ahead and click on that QR code. That's straight to my Instagram. And then the other one's to my TikTok. I keep talking about TikTok. I'm really close to 10,000 followers. When I hit 10,000, it kind of like opens up new opportunities for me or something. I don't know what that is, but they say it's something cool. So I'm really getting close. So if you think about it, please do that. You can also follow me on Detective Jason White on my Facebook page. Go there. But really what I want you to do, I want you to subscribe to my YouTube page, which is free. Like and subscribe, please. I need more. I look every day and I appreciate it. So that's really, really cool. And I like to put good content and get better. All these speakers that I've had on here are just tremendous. Once again, I want to remind everybody, next week, Nick Hall with the Palm Bay Police Department. And that's going to be it's going to be a fun episode. Well, I say it's going to be fun. Actually, Pat, his story is unbelievable. They actually had an intruder come into their home when he was a kid and hold them hostage. And it just goes from there. But he ended up becoming a police officer. I don't want to get into it too much, because it's just an insane story that you won't even believe it. Believe me.
Yeah, you'll have to have Mike Huff back, because Mike went through some similar experience like that. That's how he got interested in police work.
Really? Okay. Well,
Yes.
I didn't know that. I'll have to ask him about that. That's great. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everybody for being here. Like I said, once again, please remember to leave your comments. I appreciate all of them, and it's just a fun time to be with everybody here each week, and I can't thank you enough. And until next week, take us out, Amanda.